Thank you for joining us at the 14th edition of the Spain Investors Day. Welcome to the roundtable, The Challenge of the Green Deal in the Spanish Industry. The participants of this roundtable are Manuel de la Rocha, Secretary of State and Director of the Office of Economic Affairs and G20 from the Presidency of the Government of Spain, Luis Gallego, CEO of IAG, Maarten Wetselaar, CEO of CEPSA. I now give the floor to Amanda Mars, editor at CINCO DÍAS and deputy editor for El PAÍS, who will be moderating this roundtable. Amanda, yours is the floor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. The next panel is about the Green Deal, the challenge of the Green Deal in the Spanish industry, and there's so much to cover here. What role must the company play? What role must the governments play, which is a very hot issue, as well as the competition between Europe and the US, and also the challenges of the transportation industry. So, as I said, there's a lot to discuss, but we are lucky because we have great panelists. Welcome, Manuel de la Rocha, Luis Gallego, and Maarten Wetselaar. Thank you for being here. And let's start with the Secretary. Spain has committed to reduce the carbon emissions by 55% in 2030 and also become net zero in 2050. How can the industry achieve this goal, and what can the government do to support that?
Well, thanks very much for the introduction. Thanks to BNP Paribas and the organizers of this event for inviting me. It is great to be here with two good friends, particularly Maarten, with whom we've been working very closely recently. So when talking about decarbonization and industry, there is a lot of talk about cost and opportunities, People talk a lot about what is the cost this is costing, and there is a problem of competitiveness depending. But I'd like to emphasize one thing. First, what is the cost of no action, when we talk about fighting climate change and decarbonization. So the first thing I'd like to say is that the cost of doing nothing is far greater than the cost of addressing the decarbonization challenge, which is a challenge. The second thing is, for Spain, the Green Deal and with the targets that we have committed to 55% reduction of CO2 emissions and net zero economy by 2050, in my view and the view of the government, is the best opportunity Spain has had in a century to become a strong industrial powerhouse globally. And this will be done, obviously, on the back of clean, abundant, and cheap energy. And this is an opportunity we simply cannot miss. And so the question is not first what we will do, is what we are doing. And allow me to say that we've been 5.5 years in government, and there is a lot of things that we are doing, and we have to see where we came from and where are we now, So first of all, we committed to an agenda to expand renewables and facilitate the introduction of renewables, because we are convinced that it is on the back, as I said, of this cheap, abundant, and clean renewable energy that we will transform and become more competitive when it comes to the industrial decarbonization and industrial competitiveness. So we've done many things. I can point out at least 2-3 things. First, regulatory environment, which is clear, which is predictable. The second thing is investing. And on that, we were grateful to Europe that we got the European funds, the next generation funds, but they didn't come by chance. And that's first, you have to fight for them. Second, you have to be quick in putting together a plan and starting investing. And it is not by accident that we were the first government in deploying the funds. It is because we were convinced that we needed to anticipate. Anticipation was clear. was key to gain this competitiveness. And therefore, we are deploying a lot of the European funds. For example, the PERTE in electric vehicles, over 5 billion. Now we are in the second edition of the PERTE. The PERTE in renewable energy, we think that we can also gain competitiveness in, obviously, in the whole value chain of the renewable energy. Now we are going to launch the PERTE on decarbonization, where we will make a call for interest to all industrial plants that want to decarbonize their plants. And your final question, what can the private sector do? I mean, by now, frankly, any company that has not done anything, they are just losing the competitiveness race. So by now, companies should also bring on board and start thinking how are they going to decarbonize and take advantage of some of the public subsidies that have been put in place in the last few years, because ultimately they will have to do the decarbonization of the plants, be it electrifying or maybe, you know, a little bit longer with green hydrogen. But now, you know, you have potentially public money, subsidies that will help you accelerate maybe the decarbonization process.
Thank you so much. Mr. Gallego, I've got a question for you regarding transportation industry. How can your industry advance in decarbonization and at the same time keep affordable for consumers but also for investment?
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. It's a pleasure for me. So it's a very good question because decarbonization of the aviation industry is not going to be cheap. It's going to cost a lot of money, and to fly is going to be more expensive. That's clear. So what we are doing in the different airlines, and particularly in IAG, is to have a transformation program in order to be more efficient, in order to compensate this excess of cost that we are going to have in order to decarbonize. So in IAG, we were the first group worldwide to commit to net zero emissions by 2050. And also we were the first European group to commit to 10% use of SAF by 2030. We have established a path in order to achieve these objectives. We are working in 4 areas mainly. So the first one is to buy new aircraft, the latest aircraft that you can have in the market now. So during COVID, we stopped, for example, the 747s in British Airways and the 340-600 in Iberia. We are replacing with 787, 777, and also the 350s. These aircraft can consume up to 40% less than the aircraft that they are replacing. And in the narrow body, we are replacing the old technology with the new technology, the 320s Neo, and also the 737 MAX, that can reduce the consumption up to 20%. So that's the first thing we are doing, and for that we are investing this year, for example, 4 billion euros, and we are going to continue because up until 2030 we are going to have 192 new aircraft in our group. Other thing we are doing is investing in new technologies. So, for example, you know, we are talking a lot about hydrogen. Hydrogen, you have Airbus that they have the commitment to have a narrow-body aircraft powered by hydrogen by 2035. We don't know if that's going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's going to be only in the narrow body. In order to replace the complete fleet in the world, it can take 30 years since 2035 to replace all the aircraft available. So for that reason, SAF is going to be critical in the short, medium, and long term, mainly in the long-haul area. So SAF is critical. We need to work with the governments in order to have enough SAF. And in parallel, we are investing in other technologies like carbon capture, or we have an investment in companies like Zero Avia in order to have aircraft powered by electric engine but with a battery of hydrogen. So we are working in different areas in order to decarbonize aviation, but all of them are going to require investment, and at the end is going to be translated in the fares.
Thank you. Decarbonization is a main goal in most of the companies, and it's crucial in every strategic plan. Mr. Westerland, what makes a company to go faster than others?
I'd say being in the right place helps, and then having the right strategy. And so if I unpack that a bit for you and take a step back, say, well, why is this? And to build on what Manuel was saying, why is it so exciting for Spain? Is that, of course, we've had a fossil fuel economy for the last 100 years. And Spain has essentially no advantage in fossil fuel. It doesn't have oil, it doesn't have gas, it needs to import it from somewhere else. Almost everybody is better off than Spain. If you believe in the energy transition, as we do, and most people in this room do, if you think about the end point, and all energy consumed is renewable energy, whether it's electricity or it's renewable fuels, then Spain has a massive advantage. It has the best renewable resource in Europe, and one of the best renewable resources in the world. So you go from a system where you are disadvantaged to a system where you're one of the most advantaged countries, because you have one of the cheapest renewable energy production in the world here in Spain, in terms of your solar and your wind resource. And that is fundamental not just to creating green electricity, but also to creating green hydrogen and even to creating sustainable aviation fuel. So for a company that is, let's say, in Hungary, it will be very hard to have the strategy we have because they don't have this advantage. But for a company that's in Spain, and particularly CEPSA, that is the biggest company in Andalusia, where all these advantages are even more expressed, we are lucky to be in the right place. But you have to also create your own luck and then have the right strategy. And so to see this big advantage and then to be the first to make a very meaningful and large strategic bet on that future by investing ahead of everybody else in green hydrogen, in sustainable aviation fuel, in green methanol and green ammonia. Now, it's not a risk-free strategy because we might be a bit too early in one or two of these places. But so far, our conversations with our customers, and one of the biggest customers is sitting next to me, indicate that we are actually probably even a bit late, even if we're earlier than everybody else. And the opportunity for Spain and for CEPSA is large because we are the second fossil fuel company in Spain. Repsol is twice as big. But by the end of the decade, we will be the first sustainable fuels company in Europe. So it's an opportunity to redefine your company, to redefine the playing field and to jump the queue and to take leadership in this new industry. So it's quite big. I'm not saying it's without risk, but I'll give you one example where I think sometimes the risk is a bit overstated. And I'll take the example of sustainable aviation fuel now that we have the airline industry with us. Because we already produce SAF today, and we sell it in 5 different Spanish airports. If you compare the cost of a ticket, the average European ticket is about 1,000 kilometers. If the cost of that ticket, based on kerosene, compared to the cost of the ticket fully on SAF, fully on sustainable aviation fuel, is 40 euros more at today's prices. So the question is a European passenger willing to pay 40 euros to go zero carbon without any guilt from A to B? And I think many will be. Not everybody, but many will be. So we shouldn't be too afraid of the cost of this. I think the opportunity to be guilt-free also if you put an ocean liner on green methanol instead of fuel oil, and you ship your goods total fossil-free from one part of the world to the other, that's worth something. And the extra cost is not that high.
You sound optimistic with those $40 extra in the flight tickets.
It's €40, but...
4 euros, sorry.
No, I can show you the calculation.
You mentioned green hydrogen, and I've got a question for all of you. Today, the International Energy Agency said that only 7% of the green hydrogen projects announced will be ready for 2030. How this apply to Spain? We will be that 7% ready for 2030? Manuel?
Well, I think green hydrogen, when you look at the studies, it seems that will be because of its abundance, its versatility, its flexibility, will be one of the key energy vectors in the future. I mean, there are some studies that talk about 20 to 40% of the energy in Europe will be fueled by green hydrogen. I'm talking here about green hydrogen, which is what the Spanish government is promoting, you know. And I think, and this is the perfect also source of energy to complement electrification. You know, we will bet on electrification for many sectors, but some sectors and some areas and some plants where they need high temperatures or certain production processes that cannot be electrified, I think the complementarity with green hydrogen is very good. And that's where Spain is in an incredible competitive position, you know, because ultimately green hydrogen, what you need really is renewable energy and bigger space, you know, and we have both, and also a very clear regulatory environment which we are developing. Obviously, we are deploying a lot of funds to accelerate the projects, but it seems to me, and when you look at the data, that a lot of investors, international investors, think that Spain is the right place to be, and around 20% of the projects globally are in Spain. It's the second place where more projects in hydrogen are developing, second only to the US. And we need to accelerate, obviously, but we are doing a lot of things, you know, and let me say, just 3-4 things, you know. We launched the hydrogen roadmap. We launched calls for proposals with 3 billion. Now with the addendum to the recovery plan, we have doubled the funds deployed for green hydrogen, 3 billion. We participated in some of the European projects, which we need to conclude. Most importantly, and here is Arturo Gonzalo, we are really looking into to become a hub for hydrogen, you know, and there's always the discussion whether it is the hydrogen should be used for our own purposes or for export. Well, we think we should keep both opportunities open. What do I mean? On the one hand, we have to complete, you know, the connections with Portugal and the H2 Med, which by 2030 and onwards will give us the opportunity to export hydrogen while we develop our hydrogen clusters, because there are enormous opportunities to, with green hydrogen, to develop industries like fertilizers, like ceramics, like paper mills, which using ammonia, including the transportation sector with methanol, e-methanol. So we are doing both. And now gas natural is completely, you know, the call for interest to complete the backbone. Mm-hmm. And we need to look at where the companies have an interest to develop the industry, because for us what is important is to be a hub to produce green hydrogen, and that is critical, while we develop the domestic capacities to produce the electrolyzers, the valves, the compressors, the whole value chain. And this is a little bit what we are doing, but this is a long-term project. And yes, we need to accelerate, but I think we are still in a leading position globally.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gallegos. The slowdown in green hydrogen and Spain.
Okay, I think we were talking before about sustainable aviation fuel. There are a lot of ways to produce sustainable aviation fuel. We can produce sustainable aviation fuel, you know better than me, but from cooking oil, waste, etc. But the future is what is called e-fuel. That is fuel that you can produce capturing CO2 from the atmosphere, and then with green hydrogen you can generate the sustainable aviation fuel. That's the future. That's something that can be scalable, and that's something that we need to invest a lot of money to do that. The problem is that now 90% of the investment to develop SAF plants is in the US. In Europe, we don't have, we have a reduced number of SAF plants. And because of that, we were talking before about the price. The problem is now the SAF is 4 5 times the price of normal jet fuel. And because of that, the 40 euros that you said before. So today, in order to use SAF on the aircraft, they can fly today up to 50% of SAF. We don't have SAF to buy. So we are having mandates, for example, in Europe, to have SAF in the aircraft, but we don't have SAF available. And the SAF that we have is very expensive. So I think it's very important that we invest in Europe. I think it's a huge opportunity for Spain. In the same way we were talking before that we are leading other renewable energies, I think in the SAF area it's an opportunity for us to lead production in Europe. I said before that we have at group level a commitment to use 10% of SAF by 2030. Today, we have assured 25% of that amount. We are investing $865 million. But something that is very strange, you have the airlines trying to help to produce SAF. It's strange. Usually, we need to buy SAF in the market, but we don't have. As we don't have, but we have the mandates, we are trying to invest to have new plants. And I think if, for example, in Spain, we build the plants that are needed to comply with this objective of net zero emissions by 2050, I think we can generate a lot of employments that are going to be green employments in some way. And we, in a calculation that PwC did, they said that we can generate 56 billion euros for the GDP in Spain. So I think it's a huge opportunity if we can develop eSAF with green hydrogen.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's one of the jokes in the hydrogen industry is that the only people that make money on hydrogen are event organizers. Because there's a hydrogen conference somewhere in Europe every day, and we get invited to it. But joking aside, with the help of Manuel and the government, we will take final investment decision this year on the biggest SAF plant in southern Europe to be built in Andalusia, and on the biggest green hydrogen plant to be built in Europe, again to be built in Andalusia. So I think you will see real activity this year, not just video announcements or computer-generated images of plants, but you will see construction of these industrial assets starting in Spain today. And it's true that not every plant announced in the industry will make it to life, but with the number of announcements, if you take a bit of fantasy tax out, there is still a lot of promise of real project delivery in Spain this decade. And we need it. And we need it not only to decarbonize, but also really to prove this point that renewable fuels in Europe will come from Spain in the future. And for that, we need to invest quicker than anybody else. And I think the money is not the problem, and the vision is not the problem. What we will need to sort through is the more boring things: permits, grid connections, having enough labor, having the customers aligned, etc. Things that we can solve. But we need to solve them quicker in the next 2 years than we've been solving them in the last 2 years in order to really go up that curve. But I'm optimistic that that curve is, that we are accelerating and that we will actually have an industry, not just the promise of an industry, but a real industry before the end of the decade, and a new industry.
Mr. Gallego mentioned how is the US the country that is really producing SAF, and that brings me a question about the strong competition that the US administration means in this new environment. The IRA it's a very, very, very strong plan. The US has been very strong with that, and we have seen many investments fly to the US. How do you see the competition with Europe? Do you think the European Union is responding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, IRA certainly was a challenge an initial challenge and a wake-up call for Europe. But let me first start saying that in Europe we should welcome IRA, because ultimately, compared to the Trump administration years, this is the plan that will accelerate the energy transition in the US, and they are taking it seriously now to decarbonize their economy. Without the US, we will not meet the global goals in terms of decarbonization. So first, this is welcome. The second thing is that when they launched IRA, I don't think they took into account clearly the consequences for allies or partners, And certainly they did it in a very smart way, first putting a lot of money on the table, 260 billion euros, and in a way that is more effective, mostly through tax cuts. So for American businessmen, it's more clear, and you can see the benefits more clearly. Now, in Europe, we really have put almost as much money when you count all the amount that the governments have put nationally plus at the European level on everything. It's not that different, the total amount. But obviously, one country taking a decision is easier than many countries. So what have we done in Europe? Because yes, competition is fearsome, not just with the US, but globally to attract investments. So first, we came with a European Green Plan. We came with the European funds, which devote at least 30% of the funds to the Green Deal and green technologies. Second, we have a streamlined state aid, which was, a big barrier, sometimes too bureaucratic, and we have flexibilized them, and now we can put a lot more money on state aid. Obviously, this brings the question of who will benefit for a more flexible state aid, and you were mentioning before on the side that obviously the countries that have larger pockets, fiscal pockets, can do that, and we have just seen how Germany has written a check of 900 billion to one company, and a lot of people here don't like that, but the truth is that it's not that this investment was coming to Spain. It was either going to the US or going to Germany, so it's better if it comes. And third, we have also approved certain European regulations to make a bet on strategic technologies, critical raw materials. So we have to complete the whole picture to provide incentives, regulation, and clear targets to companies so that they invest in Spain. We still have many things to do to complete the single market, to reduce red tape. One area where we are now working, and in Spain, and I think the President might say something later, is on green finance, which is a way to promote the financing and the investment, the financing for the investment on the green area. Europe is difficult, but I think ultimately we are moving in the right direction. Now, competition is fearsome, and the Americans are smart the way they did. Last thing I'd say, there is a recent study, I don't know if you have seen it, assessment that the European Council asked the Commission about the effects, the diversion effects from IRA in Europe. And so far, the results are ambiguous. It's not so clear that they are diverting that many investments to the US. What we are seeing is significant investments in Europe, significant investments in the US, and it's not so clear that we are losing many investments.
Thank you. The US competition for a European airline.
Sorry, the competition about? Sorry?
The competition between the US and Europe regarding the
SAF. No, the issue is that Europe is only 10% of the CO2 in the world aviation in Europe. And I agree, and we support that we need to lead the decarbonization of the industry. And we are trying to drive other countries to follow this initiative. That when we have, for example, IATA meetings where we have all the regions in the world, I think everybody is in a totally different phase. So it's good that from Europe we want to lead this, but the problem is in US they are doing it in a different way, because what they are doing is they are incentivizing the production of SAF, but they are not putting band-aids to the different airlines. So what is happening is in Europe we are putting band-aids, but we are not creating SAF. In US they are creating SAF, but they are not putting mandates. So what is going to happen, and is happening, and this year, for example, we are importing SAF from US to Europe because we have the mandate and we don't have the SAF. So I think the Inflation Reduction Act is working in the way that the companies, they want to invest in US. And they are having plans that we don't have. So I think the EU refuel initiative, I think is good. It's good to have mandates, but we need to have a mechanism to incentivize the construction of plants here in Europe.
Mr. Wetselaar, Inflation Reduction Act impact in Europe?
Yeah, I said the IRA is well drafted, and as Manuel says, it's important that the US puts so much money into decarbonization. But I think actually Europe is in a stronger situation, and I'll explain you why. As you say on SAF, there are no demand mandates in the US. It's totally voluntarily. Actually, that's true across the board. And if you're going to try and promote a new industry, you need supply incentivization, subsidies, etc. But you also have to incentivize demand. And the problem in the US is they have a great IRA legislation to incentivize supply, but they don't ever incentivize demand. There is no CO2 price in the US. There is no SAF mandate. They're not pushing the shipping industry to adopt green methanol or green ammonia. In Europe, we have an 80 euro CO2 price, so industry has a real reason to look at green fuels. In Europe, we have a SAF consumption mandate. IAG and all that, they have to use SAF, and we're going to do the same for the shipping industry. So although the supply side, it's true that the subsidies in Europe are complex. There are 50 systems. You have to fill in forms this long, and you never know whether you're going to get it or not. So the subsidy system is much better in the US than in Europe. But at least I have customers who want to buy my product, who have to buy my product. In the US, if I make green hydrogen with $3 per kilo subsidy, which is what the IRA gives me, I am still not competitive with natural gas. Because natural gas is very cheap in the US, because they produce it there. In Europe, my green hydrogen is almost competitive today with grey hydrogen, because my customers pay 80, 90 euro CO2 price. So it's interesting, if you don't incentivize demand, I think the IRA will eventually disappoint. Because it's very hard if you have production but you don't have customers. You don't tend to make a lot of money.
One way to incentivize demand is support the acquisition of SAF, which is also a question on the table very often. Do you think the government could do more, give any kind of support to ease the acquisitions of SAF, not only ease the path to produce?
Well, I think what we are doing is providing subsidies for investments we have our state aid regulation, first of all, so that we need to pass through. And the way Europe works is a little bit different than in the US. So we, through regulation, force companies to use SAF. And then what we are doing is providing subsidies eventually for plants that want to produce, such as what we are doing with companies like CEPSA. So I don't necessarily need that we have to go the European models to subsidize SAF production as such.
Thank you so much. As we said at the beginning, all companies have the decarbonization in the center of the strategic plans, but sometimes we see mixed signals. Today, I read a story at Bloomberg which said that the rental car company Hertz is selling 1/3 of their electric cars fleet in the US and reinvest that money in gasoline cars. How do you read that story, despite, besides good news for gas stations? How do you read that kind of story? Because from time to time we hear like kind of step back signals.
Well, I think, I'd like to go a little bit to the, I could comment on that particular example, but there are many examples. So let's look at the bigger picture, where we are. I think Europe has set very ambitious plans to decarbonize, with the Fit for 55 to 2030 and a neutral economy by 2050. And Europe has the moral mandate to lead the global fight against climate change. And when we are talking about net zero economy by 2050, this means that all sectors have to decarbonize. Now, when it comes to transportation sector, mobility, we know it's one of the hardest. It accounts in Spain for around 1/3 of total emissions. And it's difficult, it's tough because depending where you see, it's not so easy. And we have, for example, aviation that now, SAF could play a role, but through SAF we will not get to net zero because they will have still emissions. We have maritime sector, which they are looking into green hydrogen. And then we have the automobile sector, which accounts for the largest amount of emissions, And there, I think Europe has set the targets clear. 2050, 2020, 35, we have to get rid of the fossil fuels cars. And to me, that's the clear signal for investment, So companies know what is the roadmap and they have to invest. Now, we need to accompany them. We need to accompany them with investments, etc. We also have a problem, and we have to accompany them, and the bet in Europe is the electric vehicle, that is clear. But there is a role for the public sector to do, that's clear, People will not buy cars if there are no recharging points, if they are still so expensive that they are not affordable. So there is a role to play in policy making to accompany this process where the companies see what they have to do, and they are doing it, and we can accompany them with subsidies, with regulation. Ultimately, I think and then you have the heavy vehicles, trucks. There, the story is not so easy because, it's not so clear today that the competitiveness of heavy vehicles with electric engines is so clear. But, according to some studies, in some years, if the technological progress advances, they will become competitiveness. So in Spain, at least what are we doing? We are trying to deploy and accompany the companies. We have our PERTEVEC. Here I see our friends from ANFAC that are always pounding and hammering us day in, day out that we need to do more, to go faster, and I agree, and to look at examples how to improve that. But at the end of the day, you see, I don't care if one company here or there is, selling. We need to look at the global picture, and the goals are there to transform the transport sector in a mobility sector. And we have to also do it in a way that sees opportunities, because we can only see the cost. The costs are higher. But when it comes to transportation, we have to also change the mindset. What are the benefits that accompany changing and getting rid of combustion engine cars? First, we have to do it in a way that make cities more livable. We have to make a case for less cars in the cities, for better health. We have to make the case for maybe making Spain a place for sustainable tourism and improving our transportation sector, public transportation, and this government, is subsidizing public transportation, improving our railways. So ultimately, to me, the way is there, the path is clear. There will be bumps on the road because sometimes, getting it right with the policy measures sometimes is not so easy. But companies need know what they have to do, and we just need to transit this road. I mean, I don't think, and we have to do it as leading and not just falling behind.
Thank you so much. We have just a couple of minutes, Mr. Gallego.
I was thinking about your question, and I think the issue is that we talk a lot about sustainability, but we are not aligned. So we don't have everybody working in the same direction. For example, in our different airlines, in the different web pages, you can choose to offset the CO2 during your flight and less than 1% of the people, they are ready to pay something for that. Not only in the airlines in IAG Group, when I talk to Lufthansa and to others, that's not working. So we are talking a lot about sustainability, but we are not ready to pay for the sustainability. And that's in Europe. When you go to other places, they are in other way of thinking. So in the States, for example, you don't see the same behavior that we are having here. So in the case of aviation, what we always say is, aviation is global by definition, and we need a global solution. And that's the problem, because even if we solve the problem here in Europe, it doesn't matter if we don't have a global solution.
So thank you so much. Thank you, you all. It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Spain Investors Day, please be so kind to leave the room as soon as possible. We have to comply with the protocol of the President, who will be at the closing ceremony at 5:30. Thank you very much.